This trade report opens up an interesting door for the St. Louis Blues as they continue searching for their second line center. The perfect player has become available with ties to Jim Montgomery, and this would change everything for the Blues heading into next season. We're going to go into this player, details and reports on him, and so much more later on this episode. Before we get into that, we're just giving a shout out to everyone watching this video. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, we're just about 55% of you watching this haven't hit it. We're trying to reach our goal of 4,000 subscribers, so go down below, hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a bunch, and in return, we'll give you updates from all around the Blues. But with that, Darius, let's just get straight into this today, where we do know the Blues and Doug Armstrong have been consistently looking for a second line center. They want to move Shen down to a more third line center role, and things are getting very interesting around this as we do get trade reports coming from James Murphy, a writer and reporter for the Boston Bruins. Trade rumors continue to surround the Boston Bruins with Korpisalo, and they don't need a goaltender, but Pavel Zacha's name consistently coming up. Now we're going to dive into Zacha, what it's going to take to get him, but what is your initial thoughts on Zacha becoming available? He has ties to Jim Montgomery, and in my opinion, the perfect center for the Blues to pursue.
So first of all, the craziest thing out of all of this is I was talking to Kirk over at Bruins Digest, and he said that we're not going to hit 4,000 subscribers before the start of the season. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. So your support has been unbelievable, and help us get to 4,000 there and beat the Boston Bruins one more time when it matters. But Pavel Zacha is a very interesting player for this St. Louis Blues team. Just an interesting player in general. I don't know if you can, look at his stats from last year, not just his stats, but his advanced analytics, which we'll get to in a second too, and really look at it for what it is and that it paints the whole picture. Because I don't think it does. The Bruins were really bad, and at one point, when obviously they fired Jim Montgomery, thank you, Boston Bruins, they were last in the NHL, right? So I don't know if you can really look at some of these things and think that that's the player he actually is. There's a lot to like about this player. Even in a down year last year, half a point a game player. He's only 28 years old. His contract comes with some term. He doesn't make that much for what he does. He can play second line center, right? On pretty much any team in the league, or most teams in the league. So I think that it makes a lot of sense. The Blues can free up enough salary cap space even beforehand if they want, before the LTIR from Torrey Krug's Torrey Krug's contract goes on LTIR, I should say, and frees up that cap space. They can absolutely afford this player. So I think that it's an interesting fit here. Where exactly would he fit on the team? Like I said, I think he would play second line center, and guys would shift down from there. He's a big body. He likes to play physical. He's a decent two-way player. He's not going to, put up a ton of points, but I could see him putting up 65 to maybe 70 points in the top six with the Blues, which is great, especially for that cap hit. That's great numbers. And again, he's pretty responsible defensively. Maybe not that great defensively. He's not like an Anze Kopitar or anything like that. He's not a Barkov, right? But he's at least responsible defensively. He comes with term, like I said, on his contract. I think this makes a lot of sense for the St. Louis Blues because they can kind of sort and shift their lineup a little bit, and they would become much harder to play against in the games that matter, which is in the playoffs. So I think it actually does make a lot of sense. But the biggest question mark to me, Mark, is the return.
And I think the big thing is looking at Zacha. If the Bruins are moving him, a lot of teams are going to be in on this player. But with the ties to Jim Montgomery, and we'll get into a quote that Jim Montgomery had on Zacha as well. But as Zacha as a whole, you're getting someone that is responsible defensively. He was 27th, I believe, in Selke voting just 2 seasons ago. Over 50% on the draw, throwing hits, a big body. This is the type of style and type of player you want to inject into your lineup, especially in the Western Conference where teams are getting big and fast, and Zacha is exactly that. Now, like you said last year, 14 goals, 47 points. It doesn't jump off the sheets, but with a really bad Boston Bruins team, I mean, looking at previous years, almost 60 points, 57. He has continuously progressed as a 1/2C in the NHL, and I think this is where it comes into where we know Jim Montgomery has ties to Zacha. Now, this quote was from 2 years ago when Bergeron walked into the sunset and the Bruins looked for their new starting center, and this came straight into him saying, I think Zacha's ceiling is significantly higher. Not only is he physically prepared, most importantly, he's ready for it mentally as kind of minutes. The responsibility of having played in all situations. So you're getting a guy that can be a second line center, someone that can play on the power play, on the penalty kill, and still do everything else for you. I think it's going to get really interesting if they can get him into the lineup. And the big thing is looking at the lineup, Darius, is there any way, and listen, they have a very deep roster. going into next season, do you think a lineup like this would make sense? Obviously, the fifth line are the healthy scratches, or do you think this is almost an overkill from the Blues?
Well, look at this lineup. There's so much depth here. This would be such a hard team to play against. And obviously, you're banking on a guy like Snuggerud to not go through, if you even want to call it this, a sophomore slump at this point, because he hasn't really even played a full NHL season. But you're hoping that he can produce at a high clip, right? And Pavel Zacha, you brought up a couple interesting points. You know, he would come to a familiar coach, and a coach that really allowed him to take over that position, play in all situations. Like you said, he can play on the power play, and we've seen success with the Bruins in when he was in that spot. He can play on the penalty kill and effectively. If you look at his J Fresh chart, he's a good penalty killer. He can play on all these different situations. He can play those minutes, top 6 minutes, decent foot speed, all of these things. I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes him deeper, harder to play against. The salary cap makes sense. All of these things. Again, you do wonder about chemistry, but I think that Jim Montgomery, the biggest thing here, knows how to utilize this player. We saw it when Bergeron retired. You brought it up, right? We were all looking at the Boston Bruins like, why won't they go away? And Pavel Zacha was part of that problem, I guess, if you want to call it that, league wide, where it was like the Bruins will not die. And Zacha was a big part of that. So I think that it could make a lot of sense. Shifting the lineup around, a lot of people are going to look at Suter and be like, oh, why would he play the wing? And Mark, I'll let you get into that a little bit too. Like, he probably actually might be better suited there. And again, it makes you deeper down the middle. Injuries do happen as well. So it's nice to have extra centermen. That's not a bad thing, that can play at the NHL level. But again, the biggest thing to me, what does the return look like? The Bruins want, and they're kind of in a rebuild right now, they want some younger prospects. But I also think that the Blues are in a position to really go all gas, no brakes here. And you can afford, with how many prospects that we've actually been breaking down on the channel, you know, you can trade one of them to, and even a draft pick to acquire a player like Zacha that would make a difference right now, because, you know, there's a lot of aging players in this core. You look at Braden Shen, you look at Colton Parayko, you look at, you know, Cam Fowler. I think they're in a position here with Jordan Binnington too, to win now. So it is very interesting. And I think it's something they should at least consider if Zacha is up for grabs.
And I think the biggest thing is a lot of people are going to look and listen, Pius Suter can play center. He is very good at center, but when looking at his stats from playing on the Vancouver Canucks, some of his best minutes came as a left wing, playing next to JT Miller and anyone else. So getting him on the wing, you can inject him into the top 6. If Snuggerud has a down year, which knock on wood, let's hope that doesn't happen, but you have the ability to move him up. Maybe he's better suited, no pun intended, to go into this top 6 at some point, but Zacha makes total sense. Like I said to you, Darius, I'm totally bought in if the Blues can get this. We know how close they came to making the second round next year. If you add this with Suter, with Bukestad, with all these new faces, it's going to get interesting. But like you said, the Bruins are looking for prospects. We kind of threw together a bunch of prospects. Obviously, Carbonneau, Dvorsky, these guys are untouchable in the eyes of probably fans and management. But just quickly, is there anyone on this list? Listen, draft capital can be included as well, but is there anyone on the list that you look at right now that you would not move for Zacha? Because I do think Carbonneau is a guaranteed no.
Yeah, I don't. Well, Carbonneau is not happening. That's for sure. There's a couple players, even Juracek, I would be very reluctant to trade a player like that. There's a couple guys, maybe, you know, if you're looking at what the Bruins need, they do want to get deeper at center, moving into the forward, into the future, excuse me. So at the forward position, that's what I was trying to articulate there. But obviously, I think like Steenberg can make some sense. And again, do you want to trade off some or move off of some of these prospects? No, right? So Lindstein, again, like he could be an option. Everyone here, I think, could be up for grabs except for Carbonneau, because obviously, if you're asking me, when you take a look at some of the prospects the Blues have, you have to put it up against Zacha and go, how badly do you need Zacha? How much better does Zacha make this team to be parting with a player that could make a difference in the future? And even if he doesn't make a difference, because the Blues have a lot of prospects in similar positions. They have a lot of really good defensemen coming up through the system that are either, you know, offensive defensemen or defensive defensemen, like we've been talking about, right? So, and they have a plethora of these defensive defensemen guys that can come up and be great, you know, defensive guys in the NHL. Do they maybe in the future move off one of those guys when the time is right for a position of need? That's a tricky situation, because I don't know if you necessarily need Pavel Zacha, but I do think that he would make this team better. So I feel like, you know, to me, Carbonneau is untouchable right now. You just drafted him. He looks unbelievable. So I feel like and Dvorsky as well. I mean, you've, you know, put so much time, energy, and resources into him. Why would you trade that player at this point? He's going to be a great NHLer. But I think outside of that, the Bruins are going to want something pretty significant for a second line center.
And I think it really comes down to I can't see Doug Armstrong moving on from a player that's on the crisp. We know Carbonneau is going to fight for a spot in camp, if not next year for sure. Dvorsky is at least 1 year or shorter away from joining the lineup. I could see them moving on from an unproven player, and obviously the value won't be fully there, but moving on from someone that doesn't have an importance or significance to the team next year. But Blues fans, what is your thoughts? Do you think Zacha would fit this team? Is there someone else with this report coming out? Zacha, there's Casey Middlestat, who we will touch on in a video tomorrow. There's so many names being thrown around that fits the mold for the Bruins. Is there anyone you want? Sidney Crosby. We'll do a video on whatever you guys want to see. Go down and leave a comment. And while we're talking about comments, we'll quickly do comment of the day, going into talking about how Sundqvist is the perfect player to come in and out of the lineup. You can give him nights off, have them ready for the playoffs. And once again, I want to give huge shout out to everyone leaving comments down below. Leave one down there and you could be featured as comment today. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. Darius, I'm in a blender, so let's get right out of this. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care, Blues fans.